Powered by GoGoat Sports in partnership with TSN, it is episode 71, season 4 of the Ray and Dregs podcast, and it is presented by our title sponsor, Canadian Club Whiskey. Ray, we always have fun on the podcast, but we're going to have a bit more fun than usual with today's special guest, and that is Martin Biron, former star goaltender in the National Hockey League. He'd roll his beautiful blue eyes at that when he hears me talk, but such a fun guy to be around, right? And a wealth of knowledge and information, given his history, of course, as a longtime backup to Henrik Lundqvist and some great goalies. And, you know, Marty was a starter in his own right as well, but now he's an analyst with TSN and MSG for the Buffalo Sabres and all of that. But there's no such thing as a less than entertaining conversation when Marty Biron is involved.
He's so animated in everything that he says. So it could even be like, you know, when we were at TSN at the free agent frenzy and the food tables out there, and Marty would come to get a snack. That is entertaining. He's just getting a snack, but he comes out with this energy and the way he speaks a little French and a little English together. It's just, he's a terrific guy. I got to say, you said something and it made me kind of go, you said, you know, a terrific backup goalie. And these guys, that was their career. They always make fun of themselves because they were a backup goalie. Jamie McLennan does it all the time. Marty does it all the time. Like, I don't think people realize how hard it was to be in that position and do it as well as they did for as long as they did. Their job was in jeopardy all the time, and they both stayed in the league for 15 years. Like that's a hard gig. It's a way harder gig, I think, than we might think.
You know, again, as soon as Marty starts talking, and this isn't a criticism, this isn't a knock, it's reality. How long has Marty Biron been in in the U.S.? Lives in Buffalo, in the Buffalo.
When did he start in? Well, he was
a teenager?
12 years in Buffalo, and that was 25 years ago.
You know, he sounds like we just dragged him out of rural Quebec. I mean, the Diz or Dat segment that he does on Sabres Live is sensational. So we'll obviously have to get into that with Marty Biron. Let's check out the headlines across the National Hockey League. A lot going on, and it makes good sense that we'd start with Game 3. I mean, you called it a week or so ago in saying that you thought Vegas would win in 5. Well, Vegas has the opportunity to win in 5, but first they've got to win Game 4, and that's Saturday as we tape episode 71 here on Friday. So let's check back on Game 3 last night. Always pivotal. Game 3 in any series, especially when you're down 2-0, pivotal. What do you see in the final stages, starting with the Tkachuk tying goal with the extra attacker, and then Verhaeghe in overtime?
Well, I mean, of course, you can't get by the game without talking about Matthew Tkachuk and, you know, the contributions that he has made at a remarkable level, not just in the playoffs, but all season in Florida. When Bill Zito, the GM, made that trade last year, I'm sure this was his wildest dream, that it would all work like this with Tkachuk at the center of it all. And he's just been lights out for the money. After he got rocked by Keegan Kolesar in the first period, he comes out of the game. Paul Maurice later said it was the concussion spotter pulled him from the game. And so he had to go through the protocols. But I think if you watched Tkachuk last night, to me, this is the biggest growth in his game, is that he didn't really have a great night. Like, he had an assist early, he got hit, came out of the game. So now you got to restart from scratch. And I don't know, he just didn't look sharp. He turned the puck over quite a few times. Just didn't seem to have it. But in the past, that would have dragged him out of the game, because he would have got frustrated, and he would have, even in an important moment, I remember seeing an emotionality to him. And now he just like plods along. He's like, next shift. And I was really impressed with the way that in a season important game, they lose, it's over. He he leads by the way he's playing. He's not off the track. He's not chasing the game, and he ends up, scoring the tying goal. And then it gets to overtime. And, we asked Paul Maurice, I guess it was in the Boston series. I was doing that series about Carter Verhaeghe. Why does he score so much? And, this is a guy there was no place for him in Tampa. And, he ends up, traded from Toronto to Florida. Then there's, and now he's got an opportunity to explode. Like he has 30 goals, 40 goals, right? Like,
yeah.
And Maurice said he scores off the run of play like incredibly well. So when there's a little bit of chaos, the puck gets to him and he can really score. And so you look, Bennett makes that nice play in overtime.
Yeah.
And it's like it's against the run of play. There's really not a lot going on, and boom, game's over. Like he's really an interesting player because he's not gonna carry the puck. He's not gonna, the new term, of course, is drive the play, but it comes to him and it's over. Like he can score. And so the three, there's four guys really. So those two, Tkachuk and Verhaeghe, as they've done all playoffs. Radko Gudas coming back after being injured and playing as prominent a role as he did. That they don't have the depth to withstand a loss like that. No. And then in the first half of the game, Dregs, what did they have? 5-6 shots?
Not many. Yeah.
And Bobrovsky didn't let the game get away.
Yeah.
And so all that stuff adds up to game 4 being a hell of a lot more interesting than it would have been if it didn't happen.
Yeah. So let's back up to that Kolesar hit on Tkachuk there, right? In my opinion, the NHL narrowly misses a tough situation. So the hit happens. Matthews, gets up. It looks like he's a little bit wobbly, and instantly we kind of thought, oh, geez, you got a bad skate. What's going on? The official, was it Kelly Sutherland, actually helps him, get going towards the Florida bench. Now, automatically, you would think that he goes into protocol. He goes into concussion testing, and that didn't happen. He's out on the power play. There wasn't a penalty on the hit. There was a high stick on Sam Bennett. So Florida
and a commercial
break. So there's 2+ minutes there, for him to gather his faculties, which he clearly did. So he plays a shift on the power play, and then the NHL spotter removes him from play, and he misses for 14 minutes 39 seconds. Imagine the kerfluffle, which is an underused word, if Florida had scored on that power play and Matthew Tkachuk was a part of it in some way, shape, or form. Or do we just say, look, it's a science, but it's an inexact science? It felt like a miss for me, to be fair, from the spotters. I mean, this guy was clearly impaired, or looked that way, as he got up from a thunderous hit.
Yeah, I don't think the protocol allows for, hey, let's see what he does on the next shift.
Right.
So, like that. Put, so that is, I'm with you, Dregs. It was an odd circumstance that he played on the power play. I mean, it's not like it happened bang, bang, and they didn't have, the spotter didn't have time to get to the trainer because, to say he's got to come out of the game because the face-off, there was a commercial. The ice scrapers were out there. There was plenty of time. So I don't, I wish I knew better how that protocol works, but basically the spotter calls the bench and it's not the team's responsibility. It's what the team's responsibility is to enact what the spotter says.
Right.
So I don't even really know what to say. I mean, like if he was out for protocol, which is what Paul Maurice said, then he should have been out when he got back to the bench at the commercial.
Right.
I mean, that's my understanding of it.
Yeah. And look, I mean, the follow-up could be just a, no pun intended, healthy reminder from league head office. Hey, we keep telling the world we're not slipping in the standard of officiating. And that was a tightly called hockey game 3. So let's not let any other elements of how we manage a game slip.
Right? Okay. Correct. So I assume we were going to talk about the officiating.
Yeah.
Okay, so you just segued into that. and you know where I stand on this.
Yeah.
And Paul Maurice goes out after the game, and he wants no penalties called. He wants none, zero.
Yeah.
Because I think he said there were 470 yesterday. Paul's really smart, and his math is off. There was only 11. But outside of the trip, right before overtime, and by the way, I was really happy that nobody scored because I didn't love the call.
No, it was.
I mean, even though he did, their skates banged. There's lots of and
it felt incidental though. The context seemed incidental.
Yeah. Correct. I was trying to think of who jumped inside there. It was Stevenson.
Yeah,
and
Chandler,
it felt like that probably happens a lot.
Yeah.
In a game. However, when I'm looking at the penalties, I'm like, well, which ones aren't?
Yeah.
Now, you might not like them, but here's the thing. This is bullshit when people say, oh, you got to let the players determine the game. If you let the players start to hook and trip a little bit, pretty soon they're going to do it a lot because they're not dumb. They know that, standard's easy tonight. Standard's wide.
They adjust both ways, right?
100%. I don't think you let the less talented players dictate the game. I don't think you let the penalties go, and if you call what's there, the hope is that the players adjust as the game goes on, because they will, and they do. I mean, I played a long time. If you could hold a guy, you were going to hold him.
Right.
Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And so I get people don't like 10 penalty or 10 power plays, but then don't commit 10 penalties.
Right. All right. Big three-way trade earlier this week. Columbus, LA, and of course, Philadelphia Flyers. Provorov ends up in Columbus, and you really get a clear view on what Jarmo Kekalainen and the Blue Jackets are going to do. And that is make their roster better than it obviously was. And it gets better automatically with Werenski back in healthy. I mean, significantly better, especially on that back end. So what does Provorov bring? And I can assume that trade took a number of teams by surprise, because I think of Kelly McCrimmon and the Vegas Golden Knights, and I think Kelly believes that he's got a stake in the ground when it comes to former Brandon Wheat Kings players. So the fact that Provorov ended up in Columbus probably doesn't sit well with the GM of the Vegas Golden Knights. But does he make the Columbus Blue Jackets that much better?
Well, I think so. Not I think so. I know so. Provorov's a really good player. I thought there was going to be more offense from Provorov. Like when I watched him in the World Junior Tournament, and like there were a couple of D that just in their World Junior last year just didn't belong in the tournament, and it was Provorov, it was Shabbat, and it was Charlie McAvoy.
Mm-hmm.
Like they just didn't belong there. You're like, what are these guys doing here? They're just like too good. And I thought there would be more NHL offense from Provorov than there's proved to be. Now, maybe they'll unhook it a little bit. Like maybe they'll unearth it and find more offense, or maybe not. Now, let's assume they don't. So now you have one pair with Zach Werenski and one pair with Ivan Provorov. Well, now you've got half of your top four looking like a real NHL top four. Like that, that changes them in a hurry.
Yeah.
So I do think Provorov helps Columbus a lot. From the LA perspective, I mean, they get out from underneath Cal Peterson's money, which, it was
key.
It was key. Now, that was a deal that they had signed in LA, 3 years, $15 million. And Peterson lost his way.
Yeah.
And he's in the minors. they turn around and they use that money the next day and sign Gavrikov to a couple-year extension. And then for Philly, that's a bold swing for Daniel Briere
right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate. But he said he was going to be aggressive and they were going to change, the way that they were doing things in Philly. And I kind of, is it odd to like the deal from three different teams?
No.
It kind of felt like you could see and go, gee, yeah,
so
I kind of liked
it. To finish it up, I was told, and I haven't confirmed this with Blakey, but and I don't think it matters. He retains 30% for a price, right? Like that's become something. The Wild did it twice around the trade deadline. He didn't know, LA didn't know where Provorov was going. So I guess what does it matter, right? You're getting compensation for 30%. So it doesn't matter to you where he lands per se. So an interesting and a bold transaction by
that goes back a little bit to that we hear all the time. Oh, I don't want to trade him in the division or in the conference. Yeah. What does it matter? Are you making a trade for 4 or 5 extra games, or are you making a trade for the season? You get the best return you can get.
Yeah, Ray. I mean, you mentioned the Columbus Blue Jackets building a better defense, and that happens naturally with Werenski healthy, and we've just talked about Provorov. But news this morning as we record here on Friday, they've swung another deal, Columbus. I wonder how much Babcock is motivating this. That's being disrespectful of Yarmo. But acquiring Damon Severson from the New Jersey Devils, and then immediately extending this guy to an 8-year extension at better than $6 million AAV. That blue line is getting better, Ray.
It is getting better. It's getting more experienced. It's getting bigger. I watched Severson a lot towards the end of the year. When I say watched, I mean I was at the game. Because I always think there's a difference between watching on TV and being there. You get
there would be
a little different feel. And what I noticed from Severson was he seemed to eliminate the big mistake more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's always been maybe the one thing that give you hesitation about Damon Severson is he's got, he's a big right-handed guy, can shoot the puck, can be erratic in his decision-making in the defensive zone. But it seemed like there was less of that more often, which made him a more consistent player. So there's 2 sides to this. We'll start Columbus first was, adding that player. So now if you look, you've added a whole pair this week in Provorov and Severson.
It's impressive.
That's good work. That's really great work and pretty aggressive work in Columbus. Mm-hmm. For New Jersey, they have cap issues because they've got some pretty expensive players they want to sign, Timo Meier in particular.
Mm-hmm.
They also have Simon Nemec, who they drafted number 4 overall a couple of years ago. They have Luke Hughes, or Nemec was last year. Hughes was the year before, Luke Hughes. So they have these 2 young defensemen that are ready to go.
Yeah.
Like they're ready to push for their spot and their time. I think there is a chance New Jersey takes a little bit of a back step at the start of next year when they're trying to get these young guys acclimatized to the league. But you can see what the future is and why they were able to trade Severson. Severson was an unrestricted free agent. So Columbus traded a draft pick to New Jersey. Jersey gets an asset that they can use either to draft a player or flip in another deal. And then Columbus gets the head start on signing Severson. And of course that took, that was already in motion and the deal's done. It's a good move for both teams. It really is.
Okay, so on that note, let's shift over to the Wild West of the Winnipeg Jets. All right. And it's not just speculation. I mean, Kevin Shoveldayoff is up against it here. There was this all-in mentality, at least from a player's perspective. That's what they felt the messaging was from the brass in Winnipeg. And with all due respect to Nina Ryder and the pieces that they added around the trade deadline, the players felt like there wasn't an all-in result, okay? So now you've got Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's basically saying, I'm not signing. You've got Connor Hellebuck, who's got a year left, who's like, I'm not going to be the last man standing. And you've got the trade speculation around Mark Scheifele that has been consistent for the last 2 years at least. In Hellebuck and in Dubois, you might have a diminished asset in both those guys if you don't move them this offseason. So I'm coming back to, trading in conference and division. And I think of LA when I'm trying to line up a fit for Connor Hellebuck. My guess is he doesn't want to stay in Canada. Like most players, he probably wants to go to the U.S. So, maybe it's Buffalo if they could figure it out. Does LA make any sense to you, or do you think that is just a flat out Winnipeg isn't going to do that and have to stare at him in the conference for the next umpteen years?
Well, if they eliminate LA off the board, they're making a big mistake, in my opinion.
Because of the prospects and everything LA has?
Because of the prospects, and is LA your roadblock? No. You've got 15 teams in the Western Conference that are your roadblock. LA plays Winnipeg. Do they play 5 times a year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's say Connor Hellebuck's the first star 5 times in all 5 games. That's 5 games.
Yeah.
That means you've got 77 other ones to play.
Yeah.
I think you have to look at getting the best return, the very best return, because you have a chance in the players you mentioned to really remake a team that needs remaking because they're pushed up against the wall. Yeah. As far as them going all in, the players thinking they didn't go all in at the deadline, what were they supposed to do? Trade every first round draft pick for the next 5 years? If I'm Winnipeg, I look at that team and I go, man, we have invested a lot of capital in this team. How much does all in really mean? Fans think and players think it's about today, but it can't just be about today. It's got to be about today and a few tomorrows. It has to be.
And the reality for Chevy is it's not like he's not in trade conversations on top end guys. Of course he is, but some of these guys have trade protection, and it's just a harsh reality of a smaller market like Winnipeg. They don't always want to go to Winnipeg at the trade deadline or as free agents. Well, that's not the fault of Kevin Cheveldayoff.
No, because what that really means is the guys that pop up at the deadline that you might make a deal for to be all in.
Yeah.
You're not going to pay a first rounder and a second rounder and a top prospect for a guy for 17 games and maybe a playoffs.
Right.
Unless you think you're a Stanley Cup contender. And you got to be realistic at some point. I just think with the players they have, they've given this as far or as long a run as they possibly can. And the players have decided they want to go elsewhere, so you got to do the best with it you can. Right. That's basically what Brad Treliving had to do in Calgary last year.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to make decisions like that, I'm assuming, that aren't very easy to deal with.
All right, quick thought as we wrap up headlines. You mentioned Treliving, now GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, soon joined by Shane Doan in management with the Maple Leafs, leaving Arizona. I guess the reason I'm surprised by it, and I shouldn't be, because I know the relationship between Brad and Shane Doan, and I look at the developing management resume of Shane Doan with Hockey Canada and all that, and it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense that Treliving would want to insulate himself with people that he knows and trusts. And in Shane Doan, you get a quality guy and a sharp hockey mind. What doesn't make sense is what's going on in Arizona. Like, why wouldn't they have wanted Shane Doan to have a more substantive and active presence in that inner circle of hockey operations? He's iconic as a Coyote. I understand that, but they always seem to kind of keep him on the outside. Doesn't make any sense to me.
I want you to go back and rewind the tape. And you said, "What's going on in Arizona?" And I want you to answer your own question. I don't know. Yeah. Like I don't have. You asked it. You have to answer it. Because I don't know.
You're a fan of Shane Doan, though, right? You think this is a good fit in Toronto?
Yeah, I am, because it's been a really underrated or underappreciated, maybe is the right word, climb through management for him. Yeah. It's not like he's been out, not doing anything. He's been with a couple of Hockey Canada management teams at the Worlds. Yeah. He's built some relationships through the game. He's a very popular guy. And not that being popular really matters, except as you build your way through management, you start to hear things from other teams because you know more people.
Right.
And being an assistant, which is what he is, I think his role, or what was his title? It wasn't assistant GM. It was an assistant to the manager, something like that.
Yeah.
It makes me think it's not an everyday in Toronto role.
Okay.
And that's what I took from it anyway.
Yeah.
And he's a really good person. He really is. Not many people run across Shane Doan and don't come away and go, geez, that's a really nice guy.
Those are your headlines. Our interviews on Ray and Dregs this year brought to you by our good friends at Canadian Club Whiskey, who ask, are you over beer? Why not try a CC ginger ale? It's mixed and ready in a can when you're watching the playoffs, unless you're in the Ferrero household and Matt and Landon are around. And then chances are the fridge is empty because they have consumed all of your mixed and ready CC and ginger ale in a can. Accurate, Ray?
If you want a San Pellegrino after they've been around, sure, we got those. but the CC, gone. Thanks, boys. Really appreciate it.
CC ginger ale mixed and ready in a can. Meet your new cold one.